Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video, I'll be answering all of your final questions and dilemmas ahead of the Game Week 1 deadline. If you do enjoy today's video, please do smash that like button, and if you're new around here, make sure to subscribe as well. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So if you are new to the channel, firstly, welcome. But this is a video that I do every single week just before the deadline to answer those final questions and dilemmas. And if that sounds like that would be useful to you every week, please do consider subscribing. I really do appreciate it. And this is going to be a bit of a soppy 30 seconds, but I'm wearing a top that says "Internet changed my life." And it's one of my favorite tops simply because it really has. I can't believe I wake up pretty much every day now and record an FPL video, which is something which I love so much. I love football as well. And so many of you watch it, enjoy it, and support as well. It feels like a bit of a dream, to be honest. And every time I worry that I'm going to upload a video and no one's going to want to watch anymore, and you guys still continue to watch them and to support. So if you've just watched, or if you've liked, or if you've commented, or if you've subscribed, whatever it is, you've helped me, and I really do appreciate it. And I do not take for granted what an amazing position I'm in. So thank you so much for the support during pre-season, because this is my final pre-season video. There will be a deadline stream later today, which I would love for you to tune into, 2.5 hours before the deadline, starting at 4 PM UK time. But yeah, I just wanted to say a massive thank you for all of the support, because it's been absolutely overwhelming during pre-season, and I really do appreciate it. So in today's video, what we're going to do is go through the press conference updates from Thursday and then answer all of your questions and dilemmas. It might be a long video, which I don't apologize for, because I want to answer as many of your things as possible, but there will be timestamps down below if you're watching this close to the deadline and you just want to skip to a specific part. That is absolutely fine. So in terms of press conference updates, we do get some on a Thursday, but often a lot of them are on a Friday. When there's a Saturday deadline, I'll often upload this video after the Friday presses, but obviously I can't wait for that today. So here's what we found out on Thursday. So starting with Brighton, a couple of bad bits of news really in terms of some of the players that we might want to pick. So Purvis, which is Estepinian, is back on the pitch, and Ferguson will be too. I'm not sure if they're going to be ready for the first match, was the exact quote. So Barco is going to probably start the season as the left back for Brighton. In fact, I'd be extremely shocked if he doesn't start in game week 1 and probably even game week 2, maybe game week 3. But Estepinian is now back on the pitch, and that means for me that he is slightly ahead of schedule. The first prediction that we had is that he'd be back after the international break, which is game week 4. If he's back sooner than that, it may well be that Barco keeps his starting position, or that Purvis plays as sort of like a left centre-back, or that they just rotate a bit. But what this tells me is that there's a good chance that Barco isn't going to be nailed long-term, which we kind of knew anyway. But I looked at my team. I don't need to start Barco in the first 6, 7, 8 games, because I've got a really expensive premium back line, and I'm going to show my team at the end of the video, don't worry. But if I don't need Barco for game weeks 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, by the time that I might need him later down the line, he might not be starting anyway. On top of that, it does look likely that Kadioglu will sign for Brighton. He is right-footed, but he's traditionally played a lot of his career at left-back, so he could play at right-back or left-back. For me, it's just starting to become a thing where there's a lot of potential rotation that Barco could suffer from. The alternative to that is he's been fantastic in pre-season. He looks very attacking. He's been taking corners. And when you get a 4 million defender that has all of that upside, it may still be worth going for it. But for me, this puts me off Barco slightly. And in my draft now, I've removed Barco as my 4 million option. In terms of other 4 million options that you've got, you could go for Harwood Bellis at Southampton. It doesn't look like Charlie Taylor's fully now, so I would go for Harwood Bellis. You've got someone like Wout Fass at Leicester, or you've got someone like Greaves or Johnson at Ipswich. There are other options, but for me, this has put me off Barco. I'm not saying it should put you off, but that is my opinion of it. On top of that, I'm also probably put off of João Pedro. João Pedro's not played a massive amount of minutes pre-season, but on top of that, Ferguson is back on the pitch soon. I think the way the quote came out is that Ferguson's not quite back in training, but he's very close. On top of that, they've also activated Rutter's release clause, the striker, or number 10, I suppose, for Leeds. 40 million is the release clause. I don't know if that is going to definitely go ahead, but it looks very likely. And if that's the case, that's another piece of rotation for João Pedro. Now, I also expect João Pedro to start in game week 1 if I had to predict, but I don't think that's certain. He then goes into 2 very difficult games against United and Arsenal. For me, this has done enough to put me off João Pedro as an option. That being said altogether, if you were to choose Barco and João Pedro, you're probably going to get a start from both in game week 1, and they are fine options. I'm just not sure I'm willing to take the risk with either. So that's on Brighton. On Fulham, there were a few quotes going around about Smith Rowe. It doesn't tell us a massive amount, but the quote from Silva was, it's going to be a process for him to be in his best level from a physical point of view. But he has made an impact. You can already see the quality he has. There was a much longer quote, but it's basically what we know. Smith Rowe has not played enough minutes at all in the last 2 years. It is going to take him a while to get back up to a point when he can play at least one game a week for 90 minutes. So if you're buying Smith Rowe expecting him to play every single game 90 minutes, I think you're mistaken. However, 70 minutes of Smith Rowe is probably better than 90 minutes of a lot of the other 5.5 mids. So this would make me feel comfortable enough picking him. It's not put me off. I'm just saying maybe like a sense check of you're not going to get 90 minutes from him every single week. In Game Week 1, you may well get so. But in Game Week 2 and Game Week 3, especially if Fulham are winning, not comfortably, but by a couple of goals, then you might see Smith Rowe get a little bit of rest just whilst he builds that fitness back up. But I still think Smith Rowe is the best 5.5 midfielder for me. The next is around Solanke. So I was excited for this because I have always thought that Solanke has a good chance of starting Game Week 1, but I wanted to see what was the tone of Ange. Does Ange sound like Solanke's definitely starting? Does he sound more hesitant? So this is the full quote. Not the full quote, but most of it. There's still an adjustment period there. We've seen that with every new signing that comes in. So far, he's fitting really well with the group and with training. We've still got a couple of sessions to go, but so far, so good. And then the journalist that was asking the question prompted him, so is he good for Monday? And Spurs do play on Monday, which means an extra couple of training sessions. And he said, yeah, he should be good to go on Monday. So this doesn't tell us anything really, I suppose, because he could have said that and he might not start. And I do think there is maybe a 20 to 30% chance that Solanke does not start in Game Week 1. But I still think he's brilliant value at 7.5. I still think 30 minutes, which I think is like the minimum he'll get of Solanke against Leicester, could do some damage. Of course, I want him to start. And if I knew he was going to be on the bench, I probably wouldn't pick him. But I guess I'm saying that I think he will get minutes regardless. And I think he's done enough to start. Because at the moment, it doesn't look like Richarlison is fully fit enough to start. Yes, Kulusevski's been good in pre-season, but Ange Postecoglou came out after one of their most recent pre-season games and said, we don't see Kulusevski as a number 9. He's a number 10 or a right winger. So when he's come out and said that, it would be strange to then start him as the 9 when you've got Solanke sat there waiting. So for me, I think Solanke starts. Solanke is in my team. But this isn't confirmation that he starts, but it is positive. On Manchester United, Mazraoui and De Ligt will be in the squad, which is good as a Manchester United fan. I think there's a good chance that one or both start. Do I think both start? I mean, there's a chance. So basically what we've got a situation of is that Lisandro Martinez will definitely be starting and Dalot will definitely be starting. So you've got 2 remaining spots there. Luke Shaw is now out until at least, I put just Luke there. Luke is out until at least Game Week 4. So we won't have Luke Shaw for a few weeks, which is absolutely gutting. So there's 2 options. We either play Maguire and De Ligt as centre-backs with Lisandro Martinez at left-back and then Dalot at right-back. Or we play Dalot and Mazraoui as the full-backs and Lisandro Martinez and De Ligt as the centre-backs. I think that's probably the most likely, but then you are putting 2 players that have never played a minute for United into the back line in Game Week 1. I think it's possible, though. Obviously, the game is tonight on Friday. We might get some early team news, but I think you probably don't want to pick United defenders anyway. So for now, I would avoid regardless, but it could mean that the Manchester United defence is a little bit stronger, which might make you want to go there, especially, I suppose, if you're a Man United fan. On Nottingham Forest, just a quick one. Nuno Espirito Santo said we always have issues. He's always saying that, and they do have a lot of issues, Nottingham Forest, from an injury perspective, but no big ones. So unless he is hiding something, this would suggest that all of the players that you might want to pick, Hudson-Odoi, Elanga, Gibbs, White, Chris Wood, all of the defenders, they all seem to be okay. So that is good news for the Forest assets. And then this isn't a press conference update, but just in case you've not been watching content and you've not been on social media, Oscar Bob has fractured his leg. I don't think it's been fully confirmed by the club. I could be wrong there, but 100% the case, confirmed by a lot of reliable journalists that work for Manchester City. So yeah, unfortunately, Oscar Bob's out until late 2024. So he's not a 5 million option anymore. Ahmad, I don't think is an option anymore, considering that Garnacho is now back. There is a chance, by the way, against Fulham that Garnacho's on the left, Rashford is the number 9, and Ahmad is on the right. So I wouldn't rule out a start for Ahmad in Game Week 1, but I think longer term, Højlund or Xerxes through the middle, Rashford on the left, and Garnacho on the right probably is our first choice 11. And I think even if Ahmad starts, I still don't think he gets more than 60 to 65 minutes. So for me, it's probably Rodgers if you are looking for a £5 million mid, but I don't particularly love any of them. So there we go. Those are the press conference updates. As I've said here, there'll be tons more on Friday, which is today. And also I will be covering those in the deadline stream. So if you want to get more of the press conference updates, make sure to tune into the deadline stream at 4 p.m. But we got a few decent updates there. So guys, now moving on to the questions that you asked me over on Twitter or X. I still don't know what to call that app because Twitter is the better name, but here it is. The first is £4.5 million defensive rotation. So for a lot of you, I think especially if you've got Haaland and Salah or Haaland, you're maybe having to start a 4.5 and then you'll probably have one 4.5 on the bench and each week you'll have to play one of them. Or for some of you, which you can see in the final rotation, which is this thing here, you can see that some of you might have to start two 4.5s and bench one. And so each week you'll start to bench one. So what I've done here is just give you a few examples of some rotations I like. But there are, honestly, I would say 25 to 30 rotations that work. The way that I would do this is I would pick your favorite 4.5 defender, ignore fixtures, ignore rotations, just pick the defender that you like. This is what I would do. Make a note of the weeks that they have good fixtures. So let's say you wanted to choose Robinson, which is what I would want to do. You say, right, Robinson's got good fixtures in 2, 3, 4. You wouldn't mind playing him in 6. And then 9 and 10. So I need a defender in 1, 5, 7, and 8. And then go through it in that way. And that's how you work out. It's nice and simple. There are ways you can do it, obviously, automatically. But I do it manually, just on a piece of paper. I enjoy doing it that way. So here are some of the rotations that I really like. The first is Mikalenko and Robinson. I think here you've got two defenders that will keep some clean sheets, have some attacking threat. In Mikalenko's case, the clean sheet is more likely. In Robinson's case, obviously the attacking threat is more likely. But the fixtures that you end up getting is Brighton, Leicester, Ipswich, West Ham, Leicester again, Palace. Newcastle's not great in 7, but most teams have a tricky fixture in Game Week 7. Ipswich, Everton, Southampton. There are quite a few away games in there, but also some home games. And I think in general, apart from that Newcastle game in Game Week 7, you've pretty much got a good defender every single week. Another one that I really like, and this is a bit spicy because I'm not seeing many people do it, is actually Anderson and Davis, Leif Davis of Ipswich. You could go for Munoz and Davis if you have the extra funds. But here what you get is Brentford, West Ham, Fulham, Leicester, Southampton, Everton, West Ham, Everton, Brentford, Leicester. It's arguably just as good. Palace are a very decent defence. And on top of that, you have the attacking threat of Davis. So I think that's a really nice rotation. If you wanted Anderson or Munoz, but you didn't want to go for an Ipswich defender, you could, of course, go for Konsa. You get a very similar rotation there as well with some really nice fixtures. I would just say that Game Week 7 isn't quite as strong. But in general, it's still very, very nice. So those are probably my 3 favourite rotations. If you've got a Newcastle defender like Lewis Hall, which a lot of people have, I still think they rotate best for me with Robinson. So if you've got Lewis Hall, I would have Robinson as the other player that rotates. But for me, I'm just a little bit worried about Newcastle defenders in general. With Lewis Hall, I think he'll start the season at left back. But if Newcastle do get the Gay bid confirmed and they can sign him, at left back, you've then got the option of playing Kelly, Byrne, Hall, or Livramento. Now, I think Livramento will be favoured as a right back backup rotation with Trippier, and I think Kelly and Byrne might be used more at centre-back. So maybe Hall will be absolutely nailed, but there's just too much risk associated with it for me. If you need a rotation where you start 2 defenders and you bench 1, there are probably slightly better ones out there, but one that I really like for attacking threat alone is Aina, Davis, and Robinson. We've spoken about 2 of them already, and I think Ola Aina is arguably my favourite or second favourite £4.5 million defender. And apart from Game Week 1, you get a really nice couple of fixtures in pretty much every single week. So Bournemouth and United obviously isn't ideal in Game Week 1, but then you get Southampton and Leicester, Wolves and Ipswich, Brighton and West Ham, Brighton and Southampton, Fulham and Forest, Chelsea, West Ham again in 7's not great, but then Crystal Palace and Everton, Leicester and Everton, Leicester and Brentford. So this is the situation, like I said, if you're needing to start 2 of them every week and bench 1, that is one of my sort of 3 4.5 players rotating. So there we go. Like I said, there are so many more rotations that you can do. Pick a 4.5 that you like, whoever it may be, and just find another defender that has good fixtures in the week where you don't. I would say don't worry too much if there's like 1 week where they don't rotate well, as long as outside of that, the fixtures work very well, especially Game Week 7, just because most 4.5s have a pretty tricky fixture. So I guess we'll stick on the topic of defenders, and this is a big one that a lot of people are deciding. Arsenal or City defence if only choosing one. And again, I think if you are on Salah and Haaland, or potentially if you're going with a Haaland-only draft and you want a pretty expensive attack, you probably have to choose one of a Gabriel, Saliba, White, or Gvardiol. I do think it's possible to maybe get like a Raya in goal and a Gvardiol in defence, and maybe that is the optimal combination to allow you to cover the Arsenal clean sheet, but also to get the attacking threat of Gvardiol. But I've been going back and forth on this in terms of if I had to choose one, who would it be? Because in my latest draft, I have Gabriel, Gvardiol, Trent. Very expensive, I know, but I'm covering both defenses. So for me, it's tricky because I don't have to choose, which is one of the reasons that I've gone without Haaland, because I can get an expensive attack and that defense. But I actually think the fixtures, if you're looking across the first 6, and it really does depend. If you're looking across the first 5, then I prefer Cities. If you're looking across the first 6, I would argue they're very similar in terms of Arsenal have Wolves at home, Brighton at home, Leicester at home. 3 really nice home fixtures. And then the 3 better fixtures for City is Ipswich at home, West Ham away, Brentford at home. I actually arguably prefer those 3 better fixtures for Arsenal. Then they both play against each other in Game Week 5. And then they both have 2 fixtures which you would say a clean sheet isn't overly likely, against Villa and Spurs for Arsenal, and then Chelsea and Newcastle for City. So people keep saying Arsenal got horrible fixtures. Well, it depends on the sample size that you look at. If you're looking across the first 8, well, it gets even better then for Arsenal because they then have Southampton at home in Game Week 7. So, yes, 3 of those opening 5 fixtures for Arsenal are not very good. And if you are planning to wildcard in 6, I'd probably prefer a City defender from a fixtures perspective. But don't overlook those Arsenal fixtures because they've got 4 brilliant home games in the first 7 weeks. And across the first 3 weeks, overall, I probably slightly prefer Arsenal's fixtures from a defensive perspective. What I've got in the table below, it's a really simple table, is the player. So White, Gabriel, Saliba, Gvardiol. Those are the only ones I would be considering outside of someone like a David Raya. The amount of starts they had last season, the non-penalty expected goals conceded of their team per 90. So how good is the Arsenal and City defence? FPL points per 90. And then non-penalty expected goal involvement per 90 to see what is their attacking threat like. And as you can see, Arsenal's defence was a joke last season. I mean, a genuine joke. 0.69 non-penalty expected goals per 90 is unbelievable. City were the second best defence in the league, and they had 0.86. It's they're crazy. That is brilliant defensively from City, by the way. But Arsenal's numbers to have less than 0.7 expected goals conceded per 90 non-penalty is unbelievable. So it cannot be overstated how good the Arsenal defence were last year. And you'd have to imagine that continues. It was over such a long sample size. And they've got backup now if their players need to be rotated, especially at left back. I think they struggled. Having Calafiori being brought in, I think that will only strengthen them as well. So, and having Timber back too. Yes, that could cause some rotation, which is the negative from an FPL perspective, because obviously these 3 players got so many starts last season. Saliba started every game, and after a couple of early benchings, White and Gabriel play pretty much every minute as well. So in terms of data, City defence was great, but Arsenal were unbelievable. In terms of FPL points per 90, as we know, Ben White, 5.47 FPL points per 90 is ridiculous. Gabriel and Saliba, very steady though, above 4.0 points per 90, and Gvardiol just about beating them. But of course, he didn't have quite as many starts, and he was playing an extremely attacking role towards the back end of last season. Finally, regarding goal threat and assist threat, Gvardiol is the most attacking of all of these options here, with a 0.2 non-penalty expected goal involvement per 90. White and Gabriel slightly lower, but not much at 0.15 and 0.16. And then you can see Saliba is actually at 0.06. So Saliba had barely any attacking threat in terms of he didn't get many chances, and when he did, they weren't particularly clear-cut. I know he scored a couple of goals, but this suggests that unless he has exceptional finishing for a centre-back, which he may well have, unless he improves something or Arsenal tweak the way they attack set pieces and corners, Saliba doesn't carry too much attacking threat. So for me, this is absolutely not straightforward, sadly. And I can't just say definitely this player or definitely this player. It comes down to a few things. Firstly, how do you predict the minutes of these players? If you want safety of minutes, it's absolutely Saliba. But if you think Gabriel and White get similar minutes or start every game over the opening 6 to 8, I would personally go for Gabriel and White. Also, how do you predict Gvardiol's minutes? Is he going to start every game? Could he be benched for a game like Ipswich at home? Maybe. I don't think so. But if you do, then absolutely I would go for an Arsenal defender. Basically, if you think any of these players get benched in the first 6 weeks, then don't pick them, because then one of the other players would inherently be a better choice for me. And it also just depends upon like which defence do you think will keep more clean sheets. Look at the fixtures yourself and try and work that out. For me, Gvardiol is the most attacking option here. I think the number of clean sheets for Arsenal and City over the opening 6 games will be relatively similar. So I would say I am like 1 to 2% in favour of Gvardiol over the Arsenal defence. So if I had to choose only one, I would choose Gvardiol. In second for me is Gabriel, because I think he's just as nailed as Saliba in the early fixtures for me. That's only a prediction. And he clearly has more attacking threat. They do aim for him from set pieces. Obviously, in pre-season, Saliba scored from a set piece. So maybe this is the year that now they suddenly start aiming for Saliba and he starts scoring more goals. But this suggests to me that Gabriel is the one that gets on the end of more set pieces. So for me, it's probably Gvardiol, Gabriel, Ben White, Saliba. I know that's not popular because Saliba is the most highly owned defender. If you're looking over a longer sample, let's say you're someone that's not looking to wildcard for the first 12 game weeks and you want to wildcard quite late, Saliba may be the best option because you just know that he's going to start every single game. Whereas at that point, Gabriel, White or Gvardiol might have had to bench him. So there we go. I know I've not really given you a definitive answer here because it would be silly of me to say this player is a much better option. But for me, if I'm not sitting on the fence, I would just about say Gvardiol, then Gabriel. I, of course, have both of them. So, guys, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Fantasy Football Hub and just remind you that this is the best time to sign up for 50% off, as little as £3.25 per month. You get access to so much. And I realized I don't actually regularly show you how much you can get access to with that. I just say there's loads of stuff. So you have the My Team feature with like AI recommended transfers, but you can also plan ahead and just like work out which weeks you want to play certain players. What are their projected points? You've got a list of all of the other players that you can pick. So that in and of itself is just a fantastic feature that's probably worth having. But outside of that, you do get access to Opta stats. So you know I've just spoken about those stats. It's as simple as just like searching for a player. And you can change the sample size. You can look at all of this data. You can create custom tables as well. So I've created my own custom table that I use for these videos, like big chances created, non-penalty expected goals, expected assists. On top of that, you also have a fixture analyzer as well, where you can sort the fixtures by how many game weeks. You can work out who has the best fixtures from an attacking perspective, a defensive perspective, clean sheets, goals, points. There are expert team rules. You've got a player comparison feature as well. All you have to do is search for them. You've got a team comparison feature. There is a price change thing which will pop up eventually with all of the price changes. I mean, I could go on and on and on. A match center feature, which is absolutely amazing. During the games live, you can see live bonus points updates as well. Points predictions is another one. So basically work out who, according to the AI, is more likely to get you most points. You can see here, unfortunately, Erling Haaland is top, but there are so many features here that I think it is absolutely worth doing. So like I said, if you want to get 50% off, there is going to be a link in the description down below to do that. As it works out, if you do the annual subscription for as little as £3.25 per month, you can access all of that. This is the best time to do it in the lead up to the Gameweek 1 deadline so that you can get the most from it, I suppose, in choosing the best squad you possibly can for Game Week 1. And if you don't want to pay, that's absolutely fine. There is a link down below also to get your team rated for free. You might as well do that. Get a rating out of 100 and let me know what your rating is down below in the comments. So one of the questions that you guys asked me was, are preseason minutes vital? Should we take the risk on some players? And what I decided to do was just list some of the players that maybe people are referring to and how many minutes they got during preseason. So there is some concern, obviously, around players that have played no minutes. So Foden, Palmer, Watkins have all played 0 minutes of preseason football. Of course, all involved in the Euros for England. Foden playing a lot of minutes, maybe Palmer and Watkins slightly fewer. Foden, I would say, is not going to play in Game Week 1. He's probably not going to play in Game Week 2 as well. So Foden you can rule out as an option based on what Pep has said. Palmer and Watkins is slightly more difficult because they are so integral to what their team do that I would say they both have a chance of starting in Game Week 1. In fact, probably a good chance. But yes, it absolutely puts me off. I don't have Palmer and Watkins. So if you want my honest opinion, I wouldn't be going there. Because even if they do start, they might be a little bit rusty. And I know they've just played an international tournament and they are not players that will just take 5-6 weeks to get going. But might their touch be a little bit heavy in that first game when they've not played any serious minutes for a few weeks? Absolutely. So for me, yes, it puts me off, especially considering how expensive those players are. But if you do want to go for them, I think Watkins in particular is just so important to Villa. I would be surprised if he doesn't at least get some minutes. Whether he starts or not, I'm not sure, but I think Unai Emery will probably put him in. On Garnacho, he looked so good when he came off the bench in the Community Shield. Did not look rusty at all. There are rumours going around that Rashford might be played as the number 9 to allow Garnacho on the left and Ahmad on the right. The other option that Manchester United have is Bruno as the 9, where he plays more like a false 9, Rashford on the left and then Ahmad on the right, and Garnacho comes off the bench. I think you are getting a minimum of 30 minutes from Garnacho in Game Week 1. So if you are choosing Garnacho because you love the Game Week 1 fixture, it might put me off slightly. But if you're choosing because you like him as a long-term 6.5, I think from Game Week 2 onwards, he's going to start pretty much every game for United. It does worry me, though, that Ahmed has been fantastic. You've got Rashford on the left as well as, not as Anthony. Anthony's not a serious issue. As well as Sancho, who can play on the left. And obviously, once Xerxes gets enough minutes under his belt, he can play as the 9. Or we can play Bruno as the false 9. So I don't think Garnacho's minutes are as safe as maybe they once were. But I still think he's a fine option. I would just be a little bit worried. Of course, Manchester United are the early kickoff. So if you're looking at Garnacho, it may be that we get team news. Anthony Gordon and João Pedro both played 45 minutes for their teams in pre-season. They, again, I think are both pretty important to their team. Maybe Gordon more so than João Pedro. And Eddie Howe last season, even when Gordon was injured every week, just continued to play him. My impression is that Gordon will start, but I do not expect him to get more than 60 to 65. I think what we would see is Gordon on the left, Murphy on the right, and I think Barnes would come on for Gordon around 60 minutes. I think that's what you'd see. But equally, do they have enough in their team to beat Southampton with Barnes and Murphy starting with Gordon coming off the bench? They absolutely do. The thing is, Gordon for 30 or 60 minutes against Southampton, he could do damage in either. If he comes off the bench, he's still going to get you probably points, I would imagine. So I still don't mind him as a pick, but people aren't even worried about it. And for me, I would be slightly worried if I had Gordon. Just my opinion. João Pedro, again, I think João Pedro will start. In fact, I think there's a good chance that all of these players start bar Foden, but I still don't expect João Pedro to get more than 60 minutes because a player doesn't just play 45 and then come straight back in and play 90, usually, especially when they're just coming off the back of an injury. So for me, I would be hesitant about all of these players. I don't own any of them for that reason, but the only one that I would be majorly put off by is obviously Foden. I just wouldn't have him due to the rumours going around that he won't be back till game week 2 or 3. But Palmer, Watkins, Garnacho, Gordon, João Pedro, let me know down below what you think about this. Are you willing to take the risk? I think if you're looking to own these players beyond 2 or 3 weeks, let's say you're putting them in and thinking, I want them until game week 6, 7, maybe just go for it. Because if they come off the bench in game week 1, it's not ideal, but then you have them from game week 2. If you're looking at maybe playing an early wild card or you're looking at transferring this player out in a couple of weeks, then I would probably just look to go for someone else. So as much as I don't really want to have this discussion because I don't know the answer, people want to know who are the best goalkeepers. And I put here, it's a bit rude really, but I don't really like any of them. I don't think there is a standout goalkeeper this year. I don't even think there's a standout couple. There are some that I prefer, but there are issues associated with all of them. So the only ones that aren't on here is 4 million goalkeepers. I've had like 20 questions of why does everyone have Valdemars and do people not realise Flecken exists? I think everyone with a 4 million goalkeeper on the bench acknowledges that none of them start. In fact, there is not a single 4 that I think is likely to get good minutes this season. Of course, it could be the case that if one of the starting goalkeepers gets injured, they might. And that's the case with Valdemarsson, is that it looks like he's Brentford's number 2. And if you have Flecken in your team, or regardless if you don't, if Flecken was to get injured, you'd have Valdemarsson at 4. Fabianski is another good example. If you have Areola and Fabianski, you have the first and second choice goalkeepers for West Ham. So I think that's the main reason for Valdemarsson. There aren't any 4s that I know of at the time of recording that are going to start in game week 1. Certainly not Turner, by the way, who I think is third choice for Nottingham Forest. So in terms of the 4.5s, the only one that's not on this list that maybe deserves consideration is Sanchez of Chelsea. But there still isn't confirmation that Sanchez is number 1 for Chelsea. And also, I don't love their fixtures from a defensive perspective. And they've looked really poor during pre-season. So for all of those reasons, I probably wouldn't be looking at Sanchez. So I think in third, I've got Flecken. Flecken's got 2 really nice home fixtures in the opening 3 game weeks. I actually wouldn't say Palace is a really nice fixture, but the Southampton one is. Outside of that, they've got Liverpool and City away in 2 and 4. Overall, the fixtures aren't great for Brentford, but they've got a couple of decent ones. Flecken makes a lot of saves, and Brentford were the 6th best defence in the league last season. So I think he deserves consideration. I've had him at points, but for me, that's why he's in third and not second or first. And so in second, I've got Sells. I would maybe put Sells in first if I knew that he was the starting goalkeeper for Forest, but there are rumours going around that it could be Miguel as well. Most people seem to believe it's Sells, and I would agree with that. I'm like 70 to 80% sure that Sells is the starting goalkeeper for Forest now, but I'm not willing to bet that unless I were rotating keepers, because, by the way, Sells and Henderson don't rotate badly at all. You could choose the 2 of them, and you get pretty good fixtures over the opening 5 to 6 game weeks. So Sells is in second. As I've said so many times during pre-season, Forest were the 4th best defence last season for expected goals conceded, so he's worth considering. But in first, I have Henderson, because Palace were actually the 5th best defence in the league last season for expected goals conceded. They were very good under Glasner, and I actually do like the opening fixtures for Crystal Palace. And I just think he's slightly safer for minutes, given that it looks like Johnston no longer has a future at the club, and they've not yet signed another goalkeeper. Henderson is pretty nailed on at the moment for that number 1 jersey. So that's why I have him first. That is who my current goalkeeper is. So with Henderson, Sells and Flecken, you have the goalkeepers with the 4th, 5th and 6th best defences in the league last season, but also goalkeepers that will make a lot of saves. So those are my favourite 4.5s in that order. I don't mind the 5 millions. I've put Onana, Pickford and Martinez as my 3 favourites. You've got Vicario, you've got Leno, you've got, there was another, can't remember, £5 million goalkeeper, but you've got other options in there. I actually really like Onana, not a biased United perspective, because we concede so many shots. However, we'll also concede a lot of goals as well, so maybe not that many clean sheets. But if De Ligt improves the defence, if Mazraoui comes in and he looks good, it might be that clean sheets become more common for Manchester United. So I really don't mind Onana as a 5. But I have to say, I probably prefer Pickford and Martinez. The reason Pickford is in second, I'm just a little bit hesitant about their defence this year because their defensive data didn't suggest they were as good as the amount of clean sheets that they kept last season. And they've not looked great during pre-season. Branthwaite's still not back fit. So I just have my doubts around whether Everton will be as good defensively as they were at points last season. So that's why Pickford's in second. Emi Martinez in first. I know Villa weren't a great defence last year, but that's almost not a huge issue. Because again, it means that they'll concede a lot of shots. And I truly believe that Emi Martinez is one of the best keepers in the Premier League. So he will make a lot of top-class saves and probably keep them... When they keep clean sheets, he's going to get a lot of save points, I would imagine, and potential bonus points as well. So Emi Martinez is probably just about my favourite £5 billion goalkeeper. But I absolutely love Leno as well. Vicario could be a nice route into the Spurs defence. I just think I would go 4.5, or I would maybe look at a 5.5. I've put Ederson in third. I was tempted to put 450th or something like that because I just wouldn't go there. Ederson, it just, for whatever reason, Ederson just doesn't work in FPL. I can't work out the reason for it. There's no logic behind it because City should keep a lot of clean sheets. He just doesn't work. He never has. So Ederson for me is just not an option. And again, I don't have logic for that. He just doesn't make many saves, always seems to find ways to concede, and he just never gets many FPL points. Alisson, on the other hand, I think is a better option because Liverpool are a slightly weaker defence than City, and he is an exceptionally good goalkeeper that makes, again, a lot of saves. 4 or 5.5. So Alisson is a genuine option, but I just think when you've got Quansah at 4.5, who looks likely to start now, and then Trent at 7, I would probably rather pick one of them if I was going to go for the Liverpool defence. If you want to go for a double up of like Alisson and Quansah, maybe that will work, but I just prefer some of the other options. Whereas with Raya, he's the cheapest route into that Arsenal defence, and whilst he didn't make many saves last season, and I don't expect him to make tons this season, given that they have fixtures against Villa, Brighton, Spurs and City in the opening 5, if he does keep clean sheets in those games, you'd imagine he might make a few more saves. And like I said, it feels like a very cheap route into the Arsenal defence. So I don't mind Raya for 5.5. So if I was to rate the goalkeepers overall, for me, first is Henderson, second is Raya, third is Sells. Those are probably the 3 that I'm choosing between myself. There are various options you could go for, but to be honest, no, there isn't a standout goalkeeper. And as I said, I don't really like any of them. So something a lot of you are also wondering about, myself included, is Eberechi Eze. So there are quite strong rumours that City are at least interested. I do think this is being blown out of proportion, but because of Oscar Bobb's injury, they probably do need another wide player, especially as Pep has said on a few occasions he wants to play Bernardo Silva centrally this season. He might not be able to now, and obviously Foden he'd like to play centrally. So as things stand, you've got Grealish, Doku, Savio, I believe, as the main options without Oscar Bobb there. And of course, like I said, they could play Bernardo Silva or Foden out wide and have them drift in. But it does look like they're probably going to need a wide player now. And whilst Bob plays on the right and Eze is definitely more of a left-sided player, Doku is very capable on the right. I actually think at points he looks slightly better because I think when he plays on the left, he always cuts in and shoots. Whereas when he plays on the right, he gets to the byline very well and can whip in some crosses or cut the ball back. So I quite like Doku on the right, and I think that's an option. So they could go out and sign Eze and put Doku on the right. And the reason that so many rumours going around is Eze's release clause is only 60 million. Which is very cheap in today's market. So there is absolutely a chance that this happens. I mean, Spurs are still apparently sniffing around. Liverpool have some interest, but there's nothing concrete at the moment. And I think we have to take it on what we can see. And unless by the deadline, City have put in a bid, activated a release clause, or a journalist reports that they are going to, I think we just treat Eze as the same option. And as a result, he's fantastic value at 7 million. I love the opening fixtures. Brentford, West Ham, Chelsea, Leicester United, Everton. None of those scream out as horrible fixtures. I know one of them is red or pink and 2 of them are grey, but that doesn't mean anything. I think all 6 of those are absolutely fixtures that you would expect Crystal Palace to score. So I really like Eze for that option, for that reason, I should say. But do you want to avoid him? I would say the way that I would look at this is if by the deadline nothing's changed and there are no bids, there is no release clause activated, if you were already hesitant on him, maybe you were picking him because you saw him in other people's teams and you don't really love him as an option, well then absolutely, maybe use this as your excuse to go elsewhere. But I would say if you've been keen on him all season, I've had him in every single draft since the start of pre-season, I shouldn't take him out now just because there are a few rumours. And the thing that I love about Eze is he's priced at 7 million. There are loads of good 6.5s and 5.5s. So if by game week 2 or 3, he's moved to City, firstly, you might decide you want to keep him anyway, potentially. But if not, you've got loads of options that you can go to. It's not like he's at a really horrible price point where you can't afford anyone else. And also, that would then give you some money to play with. So if you end up downgrading Eze to a Smith Rowe in game week 2 or 3, great. You've then got about 1.5 million to spend, which is lovely. So this hasn't put me off yet. As things stand, I've still got him. But something I have toyed with, and it might be the case for a lot of you, I currently only have 7 attackers plus a 4.5 on the bench. If I do Eze to Smith Rowe, it gives me enough money to upgrade a forward to a Moniz or a Wood. So I quite like that because I think someone like a Smith Rowe or a Minte or a Murphy could be a really good option at 5.5, and it would allow me to have a much deeper squad and get a 6 million forward like Wood or Moniz. So I am toying with going with that sort of route to just increase the squad depth. The other option I have is upgrading Eze to someone like Anthony Gordon and finding 0.5 to do it. Or for you guys, if you don't already have Jota, could be a nice shout. So there are various ways that you could deal with this, but I wouldn't stress about it now. I'm recording this quite early on Friday morning. If by Friday afternoon there are strong rumours, I absolutely will take Eze out. If it's something which looks like it's going to cause an issue later down the line, I probably will. But as things stand, I'll be keeping him. I'm going to now move on to my team to show you what I mean by that and how I could remove him and what my plan is. What I would probably do is just have a plan B in place. Look at how your team might be structured if you were to remove Eze. So if, I don't know, if at around 5:30 p.m. this evening, just before the deadline, it looks like Eze's off and he's not going to play in Game Week 1, that you're not scrambling thinking about what you want to do. So I would build a no Eze draft, but for now, I'll be keeping him. So guys, as things stand going into the deadline, this is my current setup. If you've not watched my team selection video, feel free to go and watch that after this to get like full justification. But I am on a no Haaland draft. Again, just to reiterate, it's not for views, it's not for clickbait. I'm not going to go with Haaland, but that's because I think that FPL is a game of 15 players, and I feel like I can upgrade significantly more players by having that extra 2.5. It's allowed me to get more players in that I want. And if I go through what my Haaland draft would look like, I end up removing one of Trent, Gabriel, Gvardiol. I have to lose Jota and I have to lose Solanke and obviously Salah. And then I gain Haaland and a few cheaper options. And whilst that might work well, for me, when I compare the two teams side by side, I just prefer my Salah draft, which is the reason that I've got him. And as a result, I'll probably captain him in Game Week 1. Because I think a lot of people that are captaining Isak, maybe you wouldn't go for Salah anyway, but I think a lot of people, if they had Salah, they would. So Isak is definitely the most popular captain at the moment, but I think that's because so many people don't have Salah. So this is the team. Henderson in goal, as I said, my favourite 4.5 at the moment. Gvardiol, Gabriel, Trent, very expensive, I'm aware. Midfield of Nkunku, Eze, Saka, Salah, Jota. It's a super strong midfield. That is therefore a double up on Arsenal and a triple up on Liverpool, which I do really like. And then Solanke and Isak as my front two. And then on the bench, I've changed this a little bit. So I had before Robinson and Barco. Like I said, I'm slightly put off by Barco now, so I've gone for Greaves. Greaves should start pretty much every game for Ipswich. And what I like is from Game Week 3 onwards, look at those fixtures for Ipswich. So if by Game Week 3 I'm starting to have issues in my team and I need to rely on a 4, I really like it. And then Ola Reina, the reason he's in rather than Robinson, they both have really nice fixtures over the first 3 or 4 game weeks, right? They both have a really nice set of fixtures. Robinson's are probably slightly better, but around Game Week 5, Robinson's fixtures really tail off and Fulham start to decrease. And if I don't want to play an early wildcard, Ola Reina's fixtures actually are good until about Game Week 10, which is another point you could look to wildcard around sort of Game Week 11 or 12. So I feel like Ola Reina just serves me slightly longer term, and he's got good fixtures in the weeks where I might need him. Robinson's got great fixtures in Game Week 2 and 3, but with my defence, I don't plan on starting him in 2 or 3. So just in terms of fixtures, I think that's probably the slightly better setup. So in terms of what can change, if we just go over to transfers, and if you are enjoying today's video, by the way, please do consider subscribing. I really appreciate it. In terms of what could change, I like Pedro Porro. So one of my 3 defenders could be removed for Porro. The other thing that I could do, which I've spoken about so many times now, is Raya instead of Henderson and Munoz instead of Gabriel. It's exactly the same price. I just think I prefer the Gabriel Henderson route, and I don't know why. I had this in my team, and I just looked at it, and I thought, I like Gabriel and Henderson more. But that is the combo. It's Henderson, Gabriel, Raya, Munoz. Let me know down below what you think. And then the other thing that I could potentially do is, like I said, rather than have Eze, have Smith Rowe in the 5.5, but then I could bench him in Game Week 1 because I could play Chris Wood, who has a decent fixture against Bournemouth at home. So play Chris Wood there. The alternative to Smith Rowe and Wood would be something like would be something like Minte or Jacob Murphy, who could start in Game Week 1, and then Moniz. So I still have a Fulham attacker. I just have Moniz instead. Of course, I could go for Moniz and Smith Rowe, which might feel slightly overkill, having double Fulham attack for Game Weeks 2 and 3. Whilst, I mean, they're great fixtures against Leicester and Ipswich, but I don't know if I trust the Fulham attack that much that I would want both of them. But those are my options there. The other thing that I have been toying with, if I just refresh the page, is in that Jota spot, I could go for Gordon. Or, and I know you're going to think this is bias, Bruno Fernandes, I do still think is a fantastic option. I would just have to find $1 million. And to do that, I've got a couple of options. I downgrade Solanke to Wood, which is actually going to be 1.5. And so I would lose Solanke, which I don't love. Or I just do that Eze downgrade to someone like Smith Rowe. It does mean that I then have to start Smith Rowe every week because I don't have the money to obviously then upgrade the forward unless I make a couple more transfers. But I don't hate the idea of starting Smith Rowe every week. But then the whole point of going for this Salah draft was to allow me to have a really strong 11 players and to not have to rely on those cheaper assets. So I think those are the main decisions really for me. I mean, other things could change, I suppose, before the deadline, but I'm relatively happy and set with this team. It will only be a couple of last-minute changes. But as I said, I will be doing a deadline stream starting at 4 p.m. UK time. So not long after this video goes live, but yeah, starting at 4 p.m. UK time. Please do tune in. Ask all of your questions live. I'll be going through any last-minute news we get and also finally locking in my team as well. So yeah, that's the team. Let me know what you think down below. So guys, there you have it. That is a very long deadline decisions video, but hopefully that answers most of your final questions and dilemmas ahead of the Game Week 1 deadline. And a massive thank you again for all of the support during preseason. I appreciate it so much. And as I said, please do check out Fantasy Football Hub using the links down below in the description. You can get a free team rating and 50% off if you use that link. Thank you very much. I'll see you at the deadline stream. Until next time, bye-bye.